shows are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Welcome to the Edventures in Tech podcast, talking the latest tips and trends in educational technology to innovate and engage your students. Here are your hosts, Andrew and Dan.
Oh, back and better than ever. This is episode 54 of the Adventures in Tech podcast. Once again, I am Andrew, and you are.
I am Dan.
We're
excited. It's been a while.
It's been a little while. We are excited you have joined us with this venture. Of course, please make sure you help us out by providing feedback and a rating on wherever you download your podcast from. We greatly appreciate your support. We've been in all kinds of classrooms. We're going to get into that. But today, Dan, we have a special guest. We are super excited. We always say super excited because that's a phrase coined by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Matt Miller. So without further ado, Matt Miller is an educator and author from Indiana, best known for his book, Ditch That Textbook, which encourages teachers to adopt innovative technology-infused teaching methods. He has written several books, including Ditch That Textbook, Ditch That Homework, Don't Ditch That Tech, Tech Like a Pirate. Matt has received numerous accolades for his contributions to education, and his work focuses on helping teachers create engaging, student-centered learning environments. Matt's latest book, AI for Educators, Learning Strategies, Teacher Efficiencies, and a Vision for an AI-Powered Classroom, explores how artificial intelligence can enhance teaching and learning. It provides educators with practical strategies for using AI tools to improve instruction and streamline classroom tasks. And we are very fortunate to have Matt with us today. And Matt, as always, Dan and I are so stoked and super excited that you have joined us again. We've been very fortunate in our district to have you on two separate occasions actually work with our colleagues and our staff members. Mm-hmm. So, and I think this is the third time we've gotten to interview you, Matt. And yeah. it's awesome. I mean, we've done so much work with you, and really that's what education is all about. So first and foremost, welcome back, Matt Miller.
Yeah, thanks. Man, with all of that introduction, I don't know if I can live up to all of that, but I certainly appreciate it. And we were just talking off air. I love getting to talk to you guys. I love how you think about education and everything. So I know this would be another great conversation.
Yeah, so we're going to jump right into it, Matt, because I don't think everybody, if they follow your blog and obviously follow all your socials, they may not know exactly what you've been up to with everything that's going on since the latest book release, which we will get to because, we know how harnessing the power of AI in education is evolving very rapidly. But here's the big thing we wanted to know.
Yeah, this is what I was most curious about.
How did it feel returning to the Spanish classroom after all the years of what you've been doing, consulting and everything?
It was glorious and terrifying. That's what, if you want to know, that's what it was like. It was glorious and terrifying. So I went back and taught for a semester in this last spring semester, teaching, it was like a full load of high school Spanish classes. And it was at the same school where I had taught before. My two daughters were students there at the time, and my wife teaches social studies there. So it's kind of like, a family thing anyway. And their Spanish teacher had to leave halfway through the year. She got a different job. And so they were just going to be without a Spanish teacher. And it's hard enough to find Spanish teachers, but in like rural, like middle of nowhere, Indiana, it's just like impossible. So, when all of the most important ladies in your life are all like, please, 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 then, what do? You say yes.
Of course.
So, so I went back and, was basically, at the beginning was just kind of like trying to remember how I used to do this. But once I started to get my feet under me a little bit, I was able to try out some of the things that I've been talking about in my workshops and in my presentations and stuff. And then, of course, with a lot of the AI that's coming out, I was able to use some of that in the classroom too. And so it was really good to get some of my own practical experience where I could see it with my own two eyes and compare it against what I used to do. But that was helpful too. But really, just big picture, I missed being with students and just being able to get back with them and goof around and joke around with them and get to know them a little bit. And honestly, the sort of like creative day-to-day struggle of how do I engage these kids today? Okay, now how about tomorrow? Now how about the next day? It's kind of like feeding the machine, feeding the monster. Like the monster's always hungry. You got to continually do it. And just getting back into all of that stuff, it's hard and it's time consuming and it's still not easy, but I missed it. And so it was really nice to get back.
So I think you just kind of said one of the challenges was trying to just get back into that routine. Was there anything that would like really surprised you in that, in that experience?
Yeah. One of the big things that I wanted to know was, how are things different? Because when I taught, since I left the class, because it's been 8 years since I'd left the classroom and started, presenting and writing and stuff full time. Since all of that happened, cell phones had come on in a big way. COVID and remote teaching happened, and now AI has started to come in and become a part of things. Even if teachers aren't using it, I mean, you have to identify the fact that ChatGPT is out there and that students are finding their ways to use it and stuff. And so, with all of that stuff going on, I just wanted to know, because every once in a while you hear people say kids are different these days. Right. But you've also heard lots and lots of generations throughout the years always say kids are different these days in their own ways, So I think one of the things that I was really bracing myself and preparing for was that things are different, that the whole thing has changed, and that I'm going to have to sort of really work to adapt and everything. And I think what surprised me was that, there are some things. Kids are very addicted to their cell phones, and it's an issue, and it's something that we've got to sort of address. But I think the thing that sort of surprised me is that for the most part, kids are kids.
Yeah.
They're still human beings. They're still interested. I mean, some of the things that they're interested in are different, but the same jokes make them laugh, and they still want to talk about the same stuff. They're still dealing with a lot of the same struggles and everything. So I think I very much prepared myself to go in there and go, oh my goodness, the whole thing has changed. And at least in my school and my classroom, some things had changed. You're still dealing with the human experience, and even though some things have changed within it, it's still very much the same thing. So in that way, I don't think that it's changed all that much.
Gotcha.
I've just been thinking a lot because, you mentioned that how great it was for you to get back into the classroom with the kids. And I think Andrew and I are fortunate because we do have that opportunity. We're in there with kids every day, but then we're also looking at the technology, the integration, the pedagogy, and all those things through different lenses. I'm just, when you made that move back to the classroom, how it was terrifyingly exciting, as you said. I just want to know what was, coming from the background of the tech integration and everything, what were you most excited to utilize? And I want to know how that when you went from that theory and that practice and everything and put it right into the classroom, what was it like to see it happening?
Yeah. Some of the things that I was probably most excited to do and to try out, one of them was the time-saving feature. And, I think whenever we look to the future at how this technology is going to impact the way that we teach and learn, this is going to be a very small part of it, and it's not going to really touch on the huge evolution of what education will look like in the future. But by golly, today, right now, for teachers that have been struggling with the overwhelm and the responsibilities and, the never-ending to-do list and everything, it is a felt need, and it is a form of a solution to that felt need. Because really, if you look at it in education, generally we put more things onto the plates of teachers, and rarely do we take things off of their plates. Yeah. And I think the fact that I was getting some help, I was getting some things that could help me plan ideas or help brainstorm with me when it comes to your AI assistants like ChatGPT and getting teaching ideas. And, if I just needed, 10 example sentences for my students to practice verb conjugation with, some of that is sort of mundane routine stuff, but it leads to learning. If I could get some help with that so that I could focus my efforts and my attention on what mattered most, that was big. And I think a lot of people are trying to solve the problem of, what does education look like in the future? What is it going to turn into everything? And that's good. And I'm about that too. But I think one of the big things that was helpful to me was I got some stuff taken off my plate, to the point that with some of this AI assistance that don't require a teacher brain, all of that stuff just freed me up.
Now that you've had a semester back in the classroom and now you're back to your consulting and doing all of your speaking engagements and so forth.
Yeah.
With the rise of digital tools and AI, what are your thoughts or your major takeaways about the current state of education?
It's almost like the Wild West, sort of. It's hard enough for the people that are in the AI field and that are covering the AI field to keep up with all the stuff. There's no way that they're going to keep up with all of the changes and all of the upgrades and everything. And even when you look at all of the changes in the technology when it comes to AI,
right.
To me, that's like a whole different side of things, is how do we use it? And there are some people who are really watching all of the upgrades and the new features like a hawk. And they're like, oh, I know everything that's going on with ChatGPT. And, Jim and I started doing this one thing and Copilot started doing this one thing. And I'm kind of like, I'm not like on the cutting edge of all of the newest features. I'm mostly just trying to figure out where all of this fits. And I think as I would say, probably for the next several years even, that's going to be one of the big questions, I think, in education, is not what are all of the features, but how does this support teaching and learning? There's some like really big foundational questions we're going to have to wrestle with about how we do our jobs and about why we exist as schools. We're going to have to figure out, like now that we have AI tools like ChatGPT around, which are of course going to evolve and change and everything. Now that we have those tools around, what are the skills that students are going to need? We had a similar reckoning when Google search started getting really big.
Mm-hmm.
You all remember, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Google search starts coming around and everybody's asking the question, well, if I can just look it up in a Google search, then what does that mean about school? And so I think we made a shift, or at least I hope we did. We made a shift from less rote memorization and fact recall, and more about what can we do with the information that we have access to.
Right.
That was one of our big shifts on that. And so now the question becomes, what is it going to be with AI? That's going to be one of the big hard things that we're going to wrestle with, is now that we have this tool in place, how does teaching and learning change to meet it? And so it might be, like one of the big things that people are wrestling with right now is writing. Right? Like student writing.
Yeah.
Because ChatGPT is really good at writing. That's really what it was made for. It's a large language model. And so it's supposed to, it's supposed to work with language. It's supposed to be able to write really well. And so if we have this tool that will increasingly get better and better as the months and the years go by, that's able to do the writing for us, or do a version of the writing for us, then what is our purpose as teachers? What is our students' purpose in the classroom? Why are we even there? And it's not to say that I think that schools don't have a place anymore. It's just going to continue to evolve. And if you look back historically, it's the same way you go all the way back to the one-room schoolhouse, where the teacher's brain was the sum total of all the information to be passed on to the students. And now we're in a very different space. It's like, education has already evolved a lot over time, and we're sort of standing on the precipice of this new evolution of education, this new version of education, and we're trying to figure out what's the role of the teacher. And if we go back to that student writing thing I was talking about earlier, like what's the point of student writing? Again, I'm not saying it's pointless, but I'm saying the way that we approach it might have to change.
Right.
Instead of saying, go home and write me a 5-paragraph essay about, the differences between Athens and Sparta in history. Instead of having them go and do that, maybe the writing task changes, or maybe we start to ask students to collaborate with an AI chatbot and have a conversation, or maybe we have them doing different creative demonstrations of learning, or maybe we have them do like smaller chunks and better scaffolding. I don't know, but that's really what I think. That we're all trying to figure out as these new AI tools come in. It's just trying to figure out it's the same thing that we've wrestled with about education throughout history. And that is, what is our purpose and how can we equip the next generation to be their best selves?
The one thing I want to say about that, Matt, is there's, to just my opinion here in seeing, is there's a current divide with those seasoned veteran teachers with what you were saying with the writing and using, like you said, use a chatbot. I think there's more hesitation on some of their points because I don't know if it's a fear of replacement or I think the newer teachers are much more likely to adapt to the technology, and maybe it's just Gen X, Gen Z, and so on and so forth. But I think that's going to be a struggle in the educational landscape for the next few years, specifically with AI.
I have some thoughts as well based on what you were saying. And I was thinking back, you said this is our third time I think we've spoken, and I remember speaking right when, the generative AI came on the map, and we were talking right at the forefront of that and many of the concerns about, student writing there and the role of teachers and how we looked at it at that point, and people can go back and listen to that. And then we talked again as it started evolving. And I find it very interesting as we're continuing this conversation, the role of AI in education, and then based on how you were describing your experience back into the classroom for those time-saving tasks. I think you said we're reaching a precipice. I think we're starting to reach a precipice, or starting to approach the idea of that AI being there for that teacher co-pilot, that teacher tool. And being able to really focus your instruction to create more inclusive learning environments. I just love the power of having that AI chatbot where I can focus on how to reach my students, not what to teach them. How can I create multiple means of representation? How can I create multiple means of action and expression? How can I create multiple means of engagement? All those tenets of UDL. To me, do it by myself in isolation and trying to provide all these differentiated resources and try and provide it in all these different means. It's not possible, especially with everything put on the teacher. But having that AI there as a teacher tool is amazing. To create those inclusive learning environments. And then switching, we talked to the student writing. I think one of the most powerful things to start emerging now, which I think quells a lot of the apprehension, as Andrew has said, of students engaging with AI, is the ability to craft your own AI chatbots for students to interact with them as they're going through the learning process. I think that's a powerful tool that I hope really gets a lot of leverage as we start moving forward. Yeah.
No, you're totally right on that. And I think one of the things, Dan, I hear in all that you were just saying right there is the overarching idea of enhancement instead of replacement. Right? That's exactly I'm hearing you say that, right? It's like, and it's not even just for students, it's for teachers too, because you know that there's some of those fears of obsolescence, those fears of being replaced by don't need human teachers anymore. By the way, I just got done writing my Ditch That Textbook email newsletter for Monday. Woo-hoo! And and so I'll give you a little heads up that in the main section, I had a great big subheading that says we still need human teachers. I think in all caps or something, like I was screaming it, and it's like the idea that we're not being replaced, we're just being enhanced. Unless, of course, you have some of those teachers that find that the AI will kind of do their work for them. And so then they just kind of like farm out all of the thinking and all the doing to AI. We see, I'm going to ruffle some feathers when I say this. We see a little bit of that right now with the teachers pay teachers culture.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, let's go find a packet on teachers pay teachers and pay $2.99 for it and download it. And now I have my whole week done. And I don't want to talk in absolutes with that, because if that frees you up to do the stuff that really does matter, okay. But if it frees you up from all of the thinking and all of the doing so that you don't have to do the work of being a teacher, that's not good. It comes back to that same idea we were just talking about of enhancement instead of replacement, right? Like, and it goes that way with the students too. And Dan, that's what I heard you saying with the chat bots also. And I think that there's a real wrestling with that too, because we know that it can, if you use the chatbots in the wrong way, it can replace human thinking, which means that students don't grow in their thinking and they don't grow in their skills. But it can stand alongside us and help us to do things. And so that's going to be, I really feel like that's one of the big things, especially maybe for the next decade, if not for the next generation, is trying to get that balance right. How much where do I use my human intellect and where do I support it with AI? Or even, where do I completely farm it out to AI? Because we know, let's look through the lens of teachers too, that with teachers, there are certain things that we see in our day-to-day jobs that are boring or mundane or routine or not what we were put on this earth to do as teachers. And so if we can get through that stuff fast, because it's important to some extent, it's something that has to be done. But if we can get through that fast to focus on what matters most, we're able to put our attention where it matters. And I think that's going to be one of the big things, is that we're going to start making tough decisions about how we use our attention, about how we focus our attention. Teachers are going to do it, but also students are going to do it too. And there are going to be teachers, maybe the ones you guys were alluding to a minute ago, there are going to be teachers who are going to be mad when students decide not to assign their attention to the things that the teacher thinks are important. There's going to be a disconnect there. And so then the question becomes, So then the question becomes, how do we resolve that disconnect? Some teachers will try to do it through coercion. They'll say, I'm going to call you a cheater and I'm going to, you're going to get in trouble, or you've got to do this because it's going to get you ready for the future. And the student's looking at it and it's like, really? How?
Right.
So we could go on and on about this. There are all of these things, but Dan, that really got me thinking about that overarching idea. I actually wrote it down on a note card: enhancement and not replacement. It's like, those were the words that I've been seeking for the last weeks and months and everything. I think that was it.
Hey, you got to quote that somewhere, Matt.
Thank you. But, I
hired by Andrew and Dan.
That's it.
Dandrew. So there's so much to unpack here. And I know we could probably go on for hours about this, but a few things that, I just want to build upon what you're saying, ruffling the feathers of teachers pay teachers. When you like you say, farming it out to that way, so Andrew and I have been working with a lot of professional development, talking with teachers. We often bring up the idea of teachers pay teachers, and what you get, and we explain what you get from that is sometimes very good. But it also, and sometimes it's not appropriate for the students that are sitting in front of you, in front of your classroom. Yeah. So you get this nice, pretty wrapped and colored PDF or whatever it is, and then you spend how much time trying to adapt what's already there to make it fit your needs. When you start looking at AI and the generative AI, you can create so much more meaningful things in a more efficient manner that are tailored with you and with the needs for your students, rather than trying to adapt something that's already created. So I think that comes to the idea or the mindset of, when we're looking at this generative AI and how to use it, we have to use it based on what we perceive our outcomes to be, what our knowledge is. I see great hope in this going forward, because teachers can focus on how to teach and not what to teach, how we can reach those diverse learners, and then also how to have those learners be able to demonstrate their understanding and respond for a variety of formats. So being able to create differentiated lessons, provide opportunities, build an AI chatbot to go along with a project-based learning. So it has your rubrics in there, it has your benchmarks, it has the questions to ask, so students have that guide with them at all times, where then the teacher can then be mobile throughout the classroom, pulling small groups, having conferences, having higher level thinking in the classroom instead of just, the recall and understanding and the higher level thinking on their own. So I think, as we move forward this AI, I think it's more of just, I don't want to go with older teachers, younger teachers, but I think it's a mindset shift. What is our overall goal in the classroom?
Yeah. Matt, I got to ask, because you're all over the country and presenting, and how often are you asked, or, when you meet with school district leaders or whatnot, and there has to be a fractured component of how many people want you to discuss the ethical considerations of AI in education, right? And you're seeing, a good diverse section and subsections of countries and districts based on, wherever they're located. What are you garnering? What is the overall sentiment of AI in education and the ethical considerations? Like, are more people for it? Are they still very hesitant compared to like when this just hit the scene almost 2 years ago? Or are school districts adapting, being like, we have to prepare these students because this is not going away?
Right. Oh man. So the ethics thing, it's all sort of like a great big, sort of like a great big ethics debate, isn't it? But the interesting thing is that there are ethical decisions to be made and ethical judgments to be made about so many different things. So when you talk, it's kind of like when you say, I'm going to talk about AI. Well, what do you mean by AI? Do you mean ChatGPT? Do you mean image generators? Do you mean something that'll crunch your data? Do you mean like the suggestions that Netflix makes to you? All of that stuff is artificial intelligence, right? Are we talking about computer vision? So when we talk about ethics, it's the same thing. It's like, let's make sure we're all talking about the same thing, because when you talk about ethics, you can talk about when you should use it and you shouldn't use it. You can talk about intellectual property and, who the information that the AI has been trained on, and whenever it kicks out new information, like who does that really belong to, and what are the responsibilities that we have with all of that? When you talk about ethics, you can talk about bias, and you can talk about discrimination, and because AI has a bias about everything. You hear a lot of people talking about like gender bias and racial bias and location-based bias and everything, but I also just recently asked ChatGPT what the best kind of coffee beans are for brewing your coffee at home, and it gave me dark roasts, and I'm a little bit offended by that because I'm a light roast guy. So,
interesting. But what about your wife? Yeah. What's your wife like?
She doesn't like coffee at all. So she doesn't care.
I didn't know maybe if it was catering towards her to know not to get you in trouble.
Yeah. That would be smart on the AI's part. That would be true artificial intelligence right there. But yeah. But when it comes to that, and then there's other people that are looking at, access and equity and everything. Right. And, as more and more of the AI models start to have premium features. One of the things that we loved about ChatGPT at the beginning was that it was equally available for everybody. Yep. You could have, like a kid in a disadvantaged neighborhood, and then a kid in a wealthy neighborhood, and a kid in a developing country. Right. And as long as you have a device and internet access, which is becoming more and more accessible, but is also a little bit of a barrier. With all of that, if you have those fundamentals in place, you have access to the smartest AI models that anybody has. I mean, that Elon Musk has access to, right. He might have a little special one on I don't know. Anyway, you get my point, right?
Yes.
And then there's even there's even the ethical side of, the power and the resources that it takes to run AI. And that's a non-starter for some people. I've seen graphics circulating on social media talking about how, a request for ChatGPT to answer a question takes the equivalent of 3 bottles of water. And, they're talking about how, Google is going to invest in nuclear power plants to be able to create more power for their data centers. And I mean, their environmental impacts and all of that stuff too. So when you talk about ethics, I have found that, school districts and schools and teachers and school leaders and everything are interested in different parts of that depending on the conversation and depending on the values of the community and everything. But I think the big overarching thing is that we realize that there are judgment calls to be made. Right. And I think one of the things that I always try to tell people whenever I go and work with them is that we need to start, in whatever ways we can, we need to start preparing our students to identify those ethical judgment calls and to be able to make smart decisions and to be able to advocate for their decisions, because their generation, we are going to leave their generation with all of these great, big, tough AI decisions to make.
Yeah.
And so, if they're better prepared for it, I think, that's one of those literacies that we've got to prepare kids for this AI future.
So I want to pivot the conversation, Matt, into what we're seeing trend-wise with ed tech, right? And, in technology integration and everything so far, what we're, the big buzzword, let's say, or everything that's buzz is all about AI, right?
Yeah.
And is there any trends in tech integration that have you extremely excited, and maybe special tools or platforms in how teachers engage with students? Not just, ChatGPT, but just in general, like something, maybe a tool has really harnessed the power of AI in a way that you're like, wow, this can be really a game changer.
Yes, I've seen a handful of them, because you've probably seen too. In ed tech, there's still a whole bunch of poorly designed tools. There's still a lot of snake oil being peddled in the ed tech world,
Agreed.
But I'm starting to see some of them that really have good, solid student learning and pedagogy at their heart. And I think that the tools that empower teachers to do great teaching in less time, or that seek to level up student thinking, I think those are the things that really have my attention the most. I'll give you a couple of examples.
Perfect.
For one, there's this newish tool called Mirror Talk that you can find at mirrortalk.ai. It's created by the company is called Swivel. If you remember those little swivel robots.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is their newest product. And what it does is it has students basically tell the app something that they've been working on or learning about. And then the app asks them a whole bunch of follow-up questions to get them to reflect on their learning and to think deeper about it. So it's really almost like a student can sit down with that prompts them to think more about their thinking. But then what it does also is it takes all the students' responses and it uses AI to kind of like analyze it and give the teacher a report about the student's thinking, and even identifies things like where they are in the zone of proximal development and how their mindset is. And I mean, just like all of this really cool stuff. You can tell that the people who designed it really know about teaching and learning. So it really empowers teachers to do some of that great stuff that either we don't feel like we understand very well, or we're just not sure how to do, or we don't have enough time. This is kind of like making it no prep to be able to do that.
I love it.
That's one. And then another one I'll mention, and Andrew, I think you mentioned something just about, student chatbots in general. I think that there's a ton of potential for those if they're used well.
Right.
You've already seen some examples of having student chatbots work as like a writing coach
to
help students write. But then also, again, having the chatbot kind of like ask them follow-up questions or encourage them to dive deeper or to sort of like analyze student work or whatever. With all of that, it goes back to that idea of enhancement, not replacement. And we're not replacing student thinking. We are enhancing student thinking. We're kind of like, it's the same way that, whenever you get to go sit down over lunch with your smart friend and they ask you questions that you never would have considered yourself, now all of a sudden you're a better version of yourself.
Right.
It's the same idea, only, you're getting it through AI. I think the thing that we got to be careful with those chatbots though is where it tries to help you get through the productive struggle,
right,
where it helps you kind of like get around the productive struggle, because sometimes they do that. I'll give you an example that I've seen of that. During the Olympics, there was an ad. You all may have seen it for Google Gemini, and it was an ad where this little girl was a big fan of this. I think she was a hurdler named Sydney. I can't remember what her last name was. But this little girl wanted to write a fan letter to Sydney, and the dad basically encouraged her to like ask Google Gemini to write a draft for her. And, so in that case, we're totally skipping the productive struggle. We're skipping all of the good stuff that leads to all that. In that case, it was almost like saying, hey, I need an AI tool to tell me why I'm inspired by this person.
Right.
And it's like, that totally misses the whole human experience.
Right.
And so, that kind of stuff, I think we've got to be super careful whenever we roll AI out to students, that we're not missing the good stuff because AI does the good stuff for us.
Agreed.
Great point. So, we talk about all these things with ed tech and everything coming in and all these different tools. And I know so much is coming out there and so much is fast paced and everything is targeting for the teacher's attention. And of course, now everything is also becoming behind a paywall where it wasn't before for all the features that you want, even though you can do all these things in other places. But I just think that there's so much happening now. And as you're out there and you're exploring all these different tools and giving examples, what advice would you give to teachers and anyone who just are overwhelmed by the constant influx of everything that's happening now with the new ed tech tools that are coming out and just the overall abundance of things thrown at them and things to try? What advice would you give to teachers, whether it's integrating technology, choosing the right AI platform, how they should best utilize the tools of AI? What advice would you give to them?
This is an easy one, because to me, some of the advice, same advice that you two have been giving teachers about technology integration. I feel like a lot of this stuff is kind of like we're just saying it again because it all sort of applies. So here are some of my go-tos. Number one, start small. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, absolutely.
we always tell everybody, start small. Don't feel like you have to use all of the tools. It's not good for you. It's not good for the students. What you want to do is you want to pick something that feels like it's a really good fit and figure it out and slowly incorporate it. Number two, keep student learning at the forefront.
Right.
So it doesn't mean just because everybody's using this one tool, doesn't to immediately just sort of blindly start using it because it must be good.
Right.
We are still, the human educators are still the ones who craft the learning environment and learning experience for our students. It's still that way right now, at least. And so I feel like that's one of our most important jobs is, we're almost like the gatekeepers that protect our students from the snake oil we were talking about earlier. So I think, those are a couple of the key ones. It really just kind of goes back to a lot of the same technology integration stuff that we've talked about before. And I still think that if we keep student learning at the forefront, one of the big things that I've been sort of harping on recently is using AI does not always necessarily equate to prepare AI future.
Right.
I think it's been really easy for people to say, oh, AI is here. AI is not going anywhere. You better get on board because it's not going anywhere. And there's some truth to all of that, but I think that's an easy way to coerce teachers into using tools that aren't going to promote good, solid learning.
I agree.
I think we've still got to keep that, right? We've still got to keep that as our North Star. We've still got to keep focusing on that. And it's too easy for everybody to say, oh, AI's here. Oh, I got to help prepare students for the future with AI. Well, I better have students use AI. Well, maybe if it makes sense, I mean, for instance, I look, because I've been reading a lot of books about, what the AI developers say are coming and what's possible in the future and everything. And I've read Mo Gaudat and I've read Mustafa Suleyman and I've read, what's his name? The Ray Kurzweil. That's a wild one. He's got a book called The Singularity is Nearer. All of these guys are talking about what the future of AI could look like. And I keep looking at all of that and thinking, man, based on what all of these people are saying, we're going to need kids who are good, solid thinkers and problem solvers.
Yeah.
And are able to adapt to new things. And they need to be lifelong learners. We talk about lifelong learners in our our mission statements in our school districts, like everywhere. But I think we really need to focus in on those things. And, there's something to be said about understanding what AI can do and how to use it responsibly and when to use it and when not to use it. Those are all literacies that are important too. But I think what's being missed is that some of those core fundamental thinking skills are going to serve us just as much in the future. Even if AI can do some of the thinking for us, we're still going to need to be able to make good, solid decisions. And we're going to have to analyze the way the world is and figure out what we should do next, because a ton of change is coming, and we want students to be able to roll with that change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to kind of, the vision you see is something, that Andrew and I talk about and we totally agree on. I just find it very, I don't know, it's very interesting that, exactly, I agree. We need students that are flexible, that are thinkers, that are designers, that are creators, that can collaborate, communicate, problem solve, do all of that. And I think one of the things that can help us ingrain these skills with our students is, as teachers, being able to utilize the AI to help us create the resources and learning environments that we can focus more of time dedicated to those practices in the physical space of our classrooms, which is really exciting. Empower students to go through design thinking process in order to identify and empathize and then find some solutions to various problems and then pitch it and then redo it and go through all those various steps, no matter what the subject area is, or engage in more project-based learning or more student choice or identifying a passion and rolling with it, and then be able to provide the resources to do it. And AI can help us do it if we craft it and prompt it correctly. So maybe we should really be thinking about not only what we're doing with our students is teaching them good questioning, which is also good prompting.
Yes, absolutely. Dan, what that makes me think of is that, if we're able to free up the time and empower ourselves to do some of this great teaching and learning, some stuff that we've always sort of known about, but sometimes we haven't had the time or the ability or the knowledge to do it. If we sort of democratize that to everybody, it makes me think of the analogy of when the tide comes into the harbor, the tide comes in, all of the ships rise.
Yes.
It's kind of like what happened. Everybody's been using the calculator analogy recently, but it fits here where, calculators came along and everybody was worried about what it would do with math and it would make us stupid. But it allowed us to get through manual calculations faster, so that now, look at us, we're able to get to higher levels of math than we ever could before because of the calculator. And so I wonder if there's going to be a similar all ships rise when the tide comes in type of thing, even with teaching and learning, where if it frees us up and it empowers us to do, more and better, education goes up. Maybe what we're able to do on a day-to-day basis in class, if you want to look through your utopian lens at the future, I think that's something that I could very clearly see.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Matt, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to put a bow on it. It's kind of hard to believe that, we've talked post-pandemic and it's almost 5 years ago, right? So it's pretty insane. And we see how much education has kind of revolutionized, and trends and innovations have completely changed. And obviously with AI, no one foresaw that coming, at least maybe unless someone had a head start on it. But it's really changed things overall. For education. And I think it's going to be excited to see where the next 5 years go. Is there anything that's specifically exciting you or that you're intrigued by?
Yeah. Really the way that in the classroom right now sort of looks is that there's sort of I don't want this to come off the wrong way, because I think this is really positive. Teacher is sort of the bottleneck right now. Like you have one teacher in a classroom of 25 kids, and that doesn't scale very easily.
Right.
It's hard to give the best of yourself to all 25 of those kids and to be able to craft exactly what they need and everything. So, as far as the education system goes, putting one teacher with X number of students for an amount of time has its benefits, but it also is a bottleneck in some way. And I really feel like in the next I think the number is just right there in the next 5 years. We figure out sort of what that looks like, and we're able to scale great learning experiences and great learning strategies to everybody in a more sort of unique, independent, inclusive way. I mean, I think the potential for that is great. Now, of course, with anything AI, it's a double-edged sword. And so I think we have to be very, very careful to make sure that the human experience is included, right, and that we don't give too many decisions over to the AI, and that we're empowering kids to be the best humans possible and not just turn everything over to AI. There are some of those very existential questions that we're going to have to grapple with. But if I look into those next several years, I think that's what I'm optimistic about, is that kids don't feel like they're stuck in the back of the classroom and they're not seen and they're left behind. And, it's so easy to do with busy teachers and overrun schools, and it's so easy. But I think there's the potential there to get that part right.
I love it. I love it. Matt, I do want to ask, and I can understand if it's not fully released or you don't know yet, but do we have the dates for Ditch Summit? Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Ditch Summit it's going to start on December 16th this year, and it's going to run all the way through January 10th. And I'm actually, as we speak right now, I'm in the process of identifying and reaching out to speakers and getting sponsors and everything. So it's definitely coming, and there's going to be a decent amount, not everything, but there's going to be a decent amount of sessions about AI, of course. I love it. I love it. So once again, we always look forward to that. It's a good time of the year. Get some hot, dark roasted coffee and to watch the Ditch Summit videos that get released daily. And anybody that needs to get Matt's stuff, of course, you just go to getmattsstuff.com, right? So, that way you'll get that newsletter, get all the information about the Ditch Summit that's coming. But Matt, once again, Dan and I cannot thank you enough for your time, your vision, your expertise, and sharing it, with us, along with all of our listeners. And we hope to be able to connect again with you soon. Yeah, absolutely. I always love our conversations. This one was no exception. It was great. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Take care. We'll see you. Wow. Matt, every time we speak to Matt, Dan, I tell you, it's more enlightening and engaging. He is such a positive individual in the world of education.
Absolutely. And, it's just, I always get a little bit more excited. He almost convinces me to, go right back into the classroom. Yeah, as he did for a whole semester, as he was begged to do so, as he explained. Yes. So a lot of great stuff with Matt. I'm sure we'll be talking to him again in the future. Of course, you can always get his stuff online, where we mentioned Ditch That Textbook. And we thank you all for your support. Listen on the platforms, leaving us review. Questions, comments, suggestions, reach out. Tech Hard, work smart, live an adventure.
Find Andrew on all socials at @NicolaTech and Dan at WCSD Tech DR.